Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. Alex's POV. Christian drove us back into the city. I didn't know exactly where we were heading, but he seemed confident. He pulled into a street parking spot near the heart of downtown, not far from the company building. I could have sworn I'd passed this area before, but I'd never noticed the bridge standing a few hundred feet away. Christian turned to me after shifting the gear into park. I thought we could walk for a bit. There's a path under that bridge. It's a bit more scenic, he explained. Sounds good, I nodded, following his lead. The evening air had a light chill to it. My sweater offered some comfort, but I immediately regretted not grabbing a proper jacket before heading out. We made our way toward the bridge. This part of town was beautifully lit. Street lamps and glowing windows from nearby buildings gave everything a soft, warm glow. As Christian said, there was a divide between the sidewalk and a narrow path with stairs that led down to the bridge's edge. It looked anything but safe, but I did my best to follow him without slipping. One of the steps was missing entirely. While Christian crossed it with ease, I came to a stop. This looks like a health code violation, I muttered under my breath. Christian chuckled. He held out his hand. I glanced at his hand, then at him, then back again. We've made it this far, I told myself. As if he could read my thoughts, he said, "Trust me. The view's worth it." And so I did. I slipped my hand into his. He helped me close the gap with ease. But just as I found my footing, I lost it again. Not exactly graceful, I stumbled into him, my chest bumping into his. I thought I might take us both down, but he steadied me like it was nothing. His arm wrapped gently around my waist. When I looked up, I realized our faces were just inches apart. The last time we were this close, he was tying my tie. Under the glow of a nearby lamp, his eyes looked even more intense. Sorry, I stammered. My face heated up like a tomato. He looked down at me for what felt like a lifetime. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum. Then, he cleared his throat and gently let go. No worries. Just watch your step. These stairs can be tricky. I nodded, finally tearing my gaze away from his, and we kept moving. When we reached the bottom, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. At the base of the bridge, the river flowed powerfully between the concrete pillars. Colored lights beneath the bridge cast a glow on the rushing water. "This is incredible," I whispered in awe. The nerve-wracking path had definitely been worth it. Christian guided us along the river's edge. I was so taken by the water that I didn't notice he'd stopped. I bumped into his back. "Sorry," I mumbled again. "You're really keeping me on my toes tonight," he teased. I gave a small smile. "Get it together, Alex." We walked a bit more before he spoke again. "Nervous about tomorrow?" "A little," I admitted. "We'll jump into meetings right away, but it should all go smoothly," he said. "You've really put in the work. You should be excited. The best part's when you get to pitch the deal. You've got this." That part made me want to panic, honestly. But I forced the bravest smile I could manage. Christian saw right through me and laughed. "Let's head up that path. It loops back to the main sidewalk." "I'm freezing." I nodded and followed him. When we finally pulled up to my apartment, it was nearly midnight. Time had flown by, and I was ready to collapse into bed before my alarm rudely woke me up at 6 a.m. Christian looked tired too. I figured he'd spent most of his day getting things ready for tomorrow. For someone who pretended not to care much about business, he definitely worked hard. I wondered what he did for fun. He didn't seem like the type to hang out at local bars. Maybe something more laid back, like a private lounge? Inside, the apartment was thankfully warm. My hands had just about frozen. Christian walked me all the way to my door. By now, he knew the way without thinking. I kept stealing glances at him as he talked about tomorrow's schedule. He looked so calm, so collected. Somehow, that made me feel calm too. Never in my wildest thoughts did I imagine walking up to my apartment after a day like this, with Christian Ivanov. Life's weird like that. "Alex?" he called just as I reached for the doorknob. I turned to look at him. Thanks for coming out tonight, and for meeting my, very opinionated mother. Somehow, she liked you. She's not so bad, I replied honestly. I definitely misjudged her. I didn't know she came from so little and built all that. She's incredible. From now on, all my snarky rich kid comments will be directed at you, Mr. Trust Fund. Christian grinned. Don't push your luck, he said. But seriously, thank you. I probably don't say it enough, but I'm working on that. It was clear, thank you wasn't something he said often. Something about that made the moment feel even more special. Then, his expression changed slightly. Did you really mean what you said at dinner tonight? He asked. My brows furrowed. You think I'd challenge your mom for the thrill of it? Of course I meant it. You might think she left the company to you as some kind of punishment, but I don't think she would entrust something so important to someone who wasn't qualified. Christian said nothing, just stared at me. I started to worry I'd said the wrong thing. But then, after what felt like a long silence, he whispered, "Thank you." And then, he did something completely unexpected. He stepped forward and gently pressed his lips to mine. Alex's POV. I sat wide awake in bed, gripping a cup of tea in one hand and Mr. Whiskers, my stuffed teddy bear, in the other. Why did I name my teddy bear Mr. Whiskers? Well, that's a long and misunderstood story. But not the story we're telling tonight. Tonight's story doesn't involve teddy bears. It involves one Christian Ivanov. 1 hour earlier. Thank you, Christian whispered softly. I was about to respond, probably say it was no big deal, but he didn't give me the chance. Instead, he did something I didn't expect at all. He stepped forward and kissed me. It was just a gentle peck, but it felt like the world froze around us. For a moment, I wasn't even sure it had really happened. When he pulled away, I wanted to grab his shirt, pull him close, and ask him to do it again, just to be sure it wasn't all in my head. You know, purely for clarity. Research if you will. When he stepped back, his eyes met mine, steady and intense. He looked so calm, while I stood there like a frozen statue. My brain had checked out, and my feet felt like they were cemented to the ground. Good night, Alex, he whispered again before slipping his hands into his pockets and walking away. And I just stood there, at my door, motionless, staring at the back of the man who had just kissed me. It wasn't until the door across the hall creaked open that I finally blinked. Mrs. Penelope peeked out, her cat Darla cradled in her arms. What a lovely young man you've got yourself there, Alex. I didn't mean to snoop, I was just setting out food for Darla when I heard a little something. These walls are thin, you know. I took a quick glance through the peephole and saw. Good night, Mrs. Penelope, I said quickly, flashing the most awkward smile of my life before slipping inside and closing the door. That woman was on a whole different wavelength of strange. Fast forward about 30 minutes of anxious pacing, and here I was again, sitting in bed with tea in one hand, Mr. Whiskers in the other, calling my boss all kinds of names, in my head of course. But because it was nearly 2 a.m. and sleep wasn't even close to showing up. I had to wake up in a few hours, but instead, my mind kept replaying that kiss like it was the final scene of a romantic movie. Maybe it was just a polite thank you kiss? Is that a thing? That doesn't sound like a thing. Maybe it was some cultural tradition? No, this was different. I glanced down at my phone. No messages from Christian. That man was probably sleeping soundly right now, dreaming about stocks, suits, or whatever rich people dream about. And here I was, wide awake, losing sleep over Christian Ivanov. Christian's POV. Here I was, wide awake, losing sleep over Alexander Hamilton. I stared up at the light fixture above my bed, a web of carefully arranged bulbs connected by wire. My mother had designed this place to make it feel more like home. I hadn't appreciated it until now, until I realized the same design hung in my childhood bedroom. Why hadn't I noticed before? Probably because I'm never this restless. I felt an arm slide around my waist. Her hand was ice cold, and the shiver it sent down my spine was far from pleasant. Bridge, I said, calling out to the figure beside me. She gave a groggy murmur. Bridge, I repeated. What, Chris? She mumbled. My face twitched. I hated being called Chris. It's Christian. 2 syllables. Not that hard. Since she insisted on shortening my name, I started calling her Bridge. She hated it. Claimed Bridget wasn't meant to be abbreviated. Well, neither was Christian. You awake? I asked. I am now, she groaned. Great. Could you do me a favor? What? Could you get up and leave? That got her attention. She sat up wide-eyed. I'm sorry, what? Leave, I said calmly. Grab your things and head out the front door. You know, the one by the living room. Her expression twisted. Christian, I'm not in the mood for games. I'm not playing. I'm ending whatever this is. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Funny enough, this was probably the clearest I'd felt in months. And why exactly? She asked sharply. Because the sound of your voice gives me a migraine. You spend my money like it's water, and you steal the covers every night. And honestly, things haven't exactly been great. I could see the emotions flash across her face. Shock, confusion, then anger. You've got to be kidding me, she snapped as she flung the covers off and got out of bed. The lights came on, blinding me for a second. You think you can just toss people aside whenever you feel like it? She hissed as she began shoving clothes into her Louis Vuitton bag. Actually, leave the bag, I said flatly. You can use one of the basic suitcases or even a trash bag if you'd prefer. She looked ready to throw the bag at me, but instead grabbed a plain black suitcase and stuffed it to the brim. All the while, she kept throwing jabs and insults my way. You know why I steal the covers? She shouted. Because I'm freezing. It's a man's job to keep his partner warm, but you're as cold emotionally as you are physically. I followed her down the stairs. Every light in the house was on now. Nathaniel, my house manager, was sitting at the bar with a drink. Everything all right, sir? He asked, half rising. Enjoy your drink, Nathaniel. No need to get involved. Bridget reached the front door, dragging her suitcase behind her. And one more thing, she said, spinning around. You know what else was awful? Everything. Who only has intimacy once a week when they're dating this? She motioned dramatically at herself. Once a week was generous, I muttered under my breath. Nathaniel tried to hide his laugh. She turned red with frustration. You're the worst, Christian. Absolutely the worst. It's Christian, I corrected calmly, then closed the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, savoring the silence. Then I pulled out my phone and did one last courtesy. I ordered her a ride. When I turned around, Nathaniel had already poured me a second drink. One glass sat waiting for me on the counter. Have a seat, sir, he said. I took the glass and sat down with a tired smile. Thanks. Don't mention it. Should I ask what that was all about? Let's just say, you won't have to hear her mispronounce your name again. Alex, POV. I stared at my alarm clock, waiting for it to change from 6:29 to 6:30. I hadn't slept at all. Not a wink. And in just 60 seconds, it would be time to start getting ready. I groaned out loud. The entire night had been wasted thinking about Christian. That kiss had completely derailed me. After hours of tossing, turning, and overanalyzing, I still couldn't figure out what it meant. Or what he meant by it. I had no idea how I was supposed to make it through this work trip without having a full-on emotional meltdown. The blaring sound of my alarms snapped me out of it. No time for nonsense now. Showtime. Miraculously, I managed to get ready on time. Thankfully, the procrastinator in me had taken the week off, and I'd already packed in advance. All I had left to do was print a few last-minute documents and then head to the airport to meet Christian. When I arrived at the office around 7:20, the building was practically empty, just a few janitors and quiet footsteps echoing through the halls. That's why I was surprised to see Joan up on the 3rd floor. Well, hey there, stranger. Long time no see, huh? Joan greeted me with her usual warmth, pulling me into a bear hug. She wasn't wrong. She'd texted me Friday night about going out, but with everything going on, especially the Mavericks deal, I hadn't had time to meet up with the group at the bar. I'd visited them briefly once, but most of my free time lately had been swallowed up by work and Christian. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I realized it had been me pulling away from our usual routine and guilt settled in my chest. Maybe that's why I blurted out the next sentence without thinking. So, Christian kissed me. Joan, mid-sip of her water, instantly sprayed it all over her desk. I couldn't help but smile. Say what now? She asked, practically tossing her papers aside to fully face me. He kissed me, I repeated, a bit more cautiously this time. And I have no idea why. I've been a complete mess about it all night. All night? She echoed, narrowing her eyes. And you didn't call me? I looked down in embarrassment. Sure, I'd figured calling her at 2 a.m. would be a bit much, but in hindsight, this definitely counted as an emergency in Joan's book. Sorry, I mumbled. It all happened so fast I'm not even sure it actually happened. And he hasn't texted me since. Before I could finish, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Christian, where are you? I looked at the time. Nearly 8 a.m. Shoot! I shouted. Joan, I have to run. But I promise, I'll tell you everything when I'm back. You better, she called after me. Don't forget, I know where you live. That instantly brought back the memory of the time she walked in on Christian and me. Yeah, I wasn't forgetting that anytime soon. When I made it to the airport, Brad was waiting for me near baggage claim. Hey Brad, I didn't know you were coming. I'm not, he said plainly. I just didn't trust that you and Christian would make this flight on time. I wasn't even mad. He wasn't wrong. Brad quickly navigated me through the crowded airport and led me all the way to security. He's already at the gate, Brad informed me. So, the moment you're through, I need you to run. He gave me a reassuring pat on the back before heading out. I looked at my watch one last time before tossing it in the security bin. It was now 8:40. Our flight was scheduled to depart in 15 minutes. Christian, POV. It was official. I was going to lose it. The time on the monitor read 8:45. Boarding was almost complete. We need to close the cabin doors soon, sir, the flight attendant informed me. We can't hold the flight for one passenger. I could feel frustration building, but before I could say anything, wait, I'm here. Alex came sprinting toward us like his life depended on it. His hair looked like he'd run through a hurricane, but I didn't care. He was here. That was all that mattered. Oh, thank goodness, the attendant muttered under her breath before ushering us on board. The flight wasn't too crowded, and we were quickly settled into the business class cabin. She even helped store my laptop bag in the overhead compartment. Alex still looked flustered as he buckled in. He was fidgeting, his hands constantly moving, his leg bouncing. I hadn't noticed it before, but now it was impossible to miss. You all right? I asked gently as the plane began to taxi. He gave me a tight-lipped smile. Yes, sorry. I just haven't flown in a while. He tried to sound calm, but his voice wavered. His eyes squeezed shut as the plane picked up speed for takeoff. He looked completely overwhelmed. Without thinking, I reached over and took one of his hands, stilling it. He didn't hesitate. He interlocked our fingers immediately. And just like that, everything felt a little calmer. Alex, POV. I'm sorry, what? The room you booked, it's actually reserved for next month, the front desk attendant said as she turned her monitor toward me. I blinked at the screen in disbelief, then looked back at her. She stared at me like I'd made a colossal mistake, and I stared at her like she must have completely lost her mind. Listen, ma'am, I said, reading her name tag. Susan? Okay, Susan, you see that man over there? I pointed at Christian. He was currently seated in one of the hotel lounge chairs, visibly frustrated, and arguing with Brad on the phone. Apparently, Brad had forgotten to reserve a rental car, and now we had to arrange for one through the Mavericks company. Christian's voice echoed through the lobby, and it wasn't exactly subtle. That man is currently on the verge of a full-blown meltdown over a car. You want to guess why? Because Brad forgot to make a simple reservation. Now, Susan, that man over there, he's my boss. Unless you want an entire hotel staff's day ruined, I suggest we find a way to work this out. Susan glanced at Christian, then back at me, her expression softening slightly. I do apologize, sir, but we really are fully booked. The only room we have available is due to a last-minute cancellation. I must warn you though. I'll take it. I cut her off before she could finish. Christian had ended his call and was heading our way. Would you like the same 2-night stay? She asked. Keep your voice down, Susan. But yes, 2 nights, I whispered quickly, hoping Christian didn't overhear the hiccup in our reservation. She began typing our details into the system as Christian arrived beside me. What's taking so long? He asked, clearly irritated. We've got less than an hour before our first meeting. Susan here was having a little trouble locating our reservation, but she managed to sort it out, I replied coolly, tossing her under the bus without hesitation. Susan raised an eyebrow at me, clearly unimpressed. Well, pick up the pace, Susan. We don't have all day, Christian snapped. Susan glared at me, fair enough, then slid the key cards across the counter with a forced smile. Enjoy your stay at the plaza, she said through gritted teeth. I mouthed a silent apology as Christian grabbed my arm and pulled us through the lobby toward the elevators. We've got about 15 to 20 minutes to get ready before the car arrives. First meeting's at noon with John Terry, Maverick CO. If it goes well, we've got 2 more to follow, one to discuss the gala, the other to lay out next steps, he said as the elevator doors opened. We exited on the 17th floor and walked toward room 1708. I led the way, key card in hand. How late are we going today? I asked as we reached the room. Goal is to be back by 9 p.m. Each session runs about 2 hours, with breaks in between. It's going to be a long day, he replied. I swiped the card, waited for the light to turn green, and pushed open the door. Christian walked in ahead of me. His footsteps stopped abruptly, causing me to almost bump into him. Alex, he said. Yes, I asked, stepping around him, only to see exactly what had caused him to freeze. There, in the middle of the room, was one king-sized bed. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of the city. But all I could focus on was the single bed we were apparently meant to share. There's only one bed, Christian stated flatly. I nodded slowly. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. This is absolutely not happening. Why is there only one bed? He may have slightly messed up the reservation, I admitted, barely able to meet his gaze. He looked at me, intense and unreadable. For a moment, I braced myself for a full-on meltdown. But instead, he let out a breath and said, "We don't have time for this. Get the laptops out." Without another word, he rolled his suitcase toward the bench at the foot of the bed and got to work. I stood frozen for a beat, stunned at how calmly he had taken it. But when he shot me a look that could pierce steel, I got moving. I thought I had booked it for this month, but turns out it was for next month, I explained during the car ride, still feeling the need to justify the mistake. Should have been obvious with all the availability they had. Alex, Christian cut in, not even looking up from his laptop. Stop talking. Start working. We were weaving through traffic on our way to the first meeting. Christian was already refining our presentation with the updated projections Brad had sent. Meanwhile, I was doing my best to focus and shake the growing nerves. Sleeping arrangements aside, we needed this deal to go well. One misstep and we wouldn't need to worry about hotel rooms, we might be crashing in cardboard boxes. I opened the shared files Christian had sent and began reviewing the data. Despite my best efforts, my eyes kept drifting to him. Christian was locked in, confident, razor sharp. Watching him multitask under pressure was nothing short of impressive. He moved graphs, edited slides, refined talking points, all in fluid rhythm. Sitting next to him made me feel like I was just trying to keep up. Alex. His voice broke my thoughts. Yes. He finally looked at me, his eyes steady. I need you to promise me one thing. What is it? No matter what Jack Nicholson, the CEO, says or does, don't let me lose it. I can't afford to embarrass myself or this company in front of John Terry. I blinked. Who the heck is Jack Nicholson? Christian had never mentioned this man before. Got it, I said. Just, maybe try to avoid using the language you just did during the meeting. He gave a dry smile, but the tension remained. The truth was, this entire company, and everyone in it, was relying on Christian to keep his cool. And I wasn't entirely sure if that was a comforting thought or a terrifying one. Alex's POV. "It's been a while, John," Christian said as we stepped into the boardroom. "Christian," John Terry replied, skipping the handshake and pulling him into a hug. "Man, it's good to see you." I couldn't help but stare for a moment. John's smile was so bright it could have starred in a toothpaste commercial. He reminded me of Chip Skylark from the Fairly OddParents, shiny teeth and all. "Look where college took you. I always figured you'd end up selling magazines door to door," Christian joked. John laughed, his dimples deepening on each cheek. Of course he had dimples. Every hair on his head was perfectly styled, not a single wrinkle in his tailored suit. The man looked like he walked out of a high-end commercial. "Man, I thought you were heading straight into anger management," John fired back, smirking. I nearly choked on my water. Definitely didn't expect that. Then John's eyes landed on me. "And this must be the assistant? He's charming." I nearly dropped the glass. My thoughts scattered, and before I could respond, another man entered the boardroom. "Well, look who the cat dragged in," the man said, smirking at Christian. He looked less like a boardroom exec and more like a runway model for an Armani cologne ad. No blazer, just a partially unbuttoned dress shirt revealing a hint of chest tattoo. I blinked, unsure who to focus on. One was all business, the other all bold energy. This meeting was starting to feel more like an unscripted drama than a corporate negotiation. "All right, grab your seats and behave for the rest of the board," John said, gesturing toward the table. "And Jack, button up your shirt. It's showtime." What on earth was going on? Jack rolled his eyes but complied. As Christian took the seat beside me, I leaned in to say something, but before I could, a new group of men and women walked in. Everyone immediately stood. "Oh, so we were standing now? Got it." I followed suit. "Good morning," John said. The playful vibe from earlier vanished. In its place was a professional tension thick enough to slice. "We're here to discuss a potential partnership with Ivanov Corp," one of the board members began. "Joining us is their CEO, Christian Ivanov. The company specializes in a variety of high-performance products, including travel and outdoor gear. They're among the few national suppliers to have worked with NASA-grade materials and military technology." My eyes flicked to Christian. "Wait, we've worked with NASA?" There was clearly a lot I didn't know about this company. "Mr. Ivanov has provided data for the board to review," John added. "You'll find it in the shared folder. Once you've had time to review it, Mr. Ivanov will walk you through the projections." An hour passed as the board combed through our portfolio. I spent most of that time trying not to soak my palms and nerves. Christian fielded most questions effortlessly about financial forecasts, department growth, and expansion plans. That is, until he spoke. "Let's address the elephant in the room," Jack said, leaning forward. "The failed deal with Larrington." Christian tensed beside me. "What happened there?" Jack asked. Christian paused before answering, jaw shifting. "Larrington and I shared similar goals, but ultimately couldn't reach an agreement." "And why was that?" another board member asked. "They proposed a structure that wasn't financially viable on our end," Christian replied. Jack chimed in, smugly. "He claims you told him to go get braces to straighten out his life." Then added he was about as helpful as an ashtray on a motorcycle. I saw Christian's muscles tighten. "And finally," Jack continued, "you said his company was like one-ply toilet paper, unreliable." I caught John trying to hide a grin. Honestly? So was I. I had no idea Christian had that kind of roast arsenal. Christian, however, didn't look amused. He looked like a volcano on the verge of eruption. The vein near his temple was starting to pulse. Instinctively, I reached under the table and placed a hand gently on his thigh. He flinched at first, then looked at me. I gave him a silent look. "Keep it cool." He exhaled slowly, and to my surprise, placed his hand over mine. My palms were a mess, but he didn't seem to care. "I acted out of frustration," he admitted. "But there are a few things I won't compromise on, integrity being one of them." He paused, letting the moment settle. "I lost my temper, yes. And my mother, the founder of Ivanov Corp., would have been disappointed in that. But she would have been proud to know I stood my ground for what's right. This company matters, to her and to me." I intend to honor her legacy by doing better and being better as I grow into this role. Now it was Jack who clenched his jaw. Well said, Mr. Ivanov, another board member replied. The data you've compiled is impressive, and we believe that Ivanov Corp and Mavericks Corp have tremendous potential together. We look forward to our next sessions and discussions. The board member stood, and like before, everyone else followed. So, standing again? I scrambled to my feet. Each board member began to file out, but not before stopping to shake Christian's hand, and mine. Well done, Mr. Ivanov. Well done, Mr. Hamilton, one said. Thank you, I stammered, completely confused about how they even knew my name, let alone why I was being thanked. Looks like you made quite the impression, John said, shaking Christian's hand. And you too, Alexander. He extended his hand toward me. I shook it, still in a bit of disbelief. Christian's always been great at launching things, and crashing them just as hard, Jack muttered. Christian gave Jack a firm pat on the back and grinned. Why don't you go suck on your favorite lemon wedge, Jack? With that, he turned and led me out of the boardroom. Alex's POV. I finally understood why the board members knew who I was. As I reviewed the presentation slides during our break, I noticed Christian had made a small but meaningful change that morning. Previously, the title slide read, Christian Ivanov. Ivanov Corporation. Now it read, Christian Ivanov. Alexander Hamilton. Ivanov Corporation. He had added my name. I couldn't stop the wide smile that stretched across my face. It was subtle, maybe even small to someone else, but for me, it meant everything. I wasn't used to being recognized like this. Christian sat across from me in one of the lounge chairs, laser-focused on his laptop as he reviewed the material. His brows furrowed every so often as he concentrated, completely immersed. We were on break before our third meeting of the day. The second meeting had gone remarkably well, and we still had about an hour until the next one. I, however, felt completely drained. Christian, on the other hand, looked like he'd just gotten a second wind. He wanted to tweak some of the slides to include upcoming auction events. When he said, we, it quickly became clear he meant him. I was mostly zoning out in front of my screen. Then I felt a vibration in my pocket. I sat up and gently placed my laptop on one of the low circular coffee tables. When I glanced at the caller ID, my chest tightened and my stomach dropped. Where are you going? Christian asked as he noticed me get up. I need to take this call, I muttered, moving past him toward the hallway. Don't be long, he said casually, but I didn't answer. Once I stepped into the corridor, I accepted the call. Hello. Alex. My mom's voice came through. Alex, are you there? I'm here, I said softly. Hi, sweetie. How are you, baby? There was that question again. The one she always asked but never really waited for the answer. I sent you money less than a month ago, I said. My tone was sharper than I intended, but I could feel frustration bubbling up. I wasn't sure how much more of this I could handle. I know, baby, but it's bad. It's really bad. The startup just isn't taking off and, please, Mom, no more about the startups. I swallowed hard. I know where the money's really going and I can't keep doing this. Silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was no longer soft. It turned bitter. You're such an ungrateful little brat, you know that? I raised you, Alex. You don't get to just walk away. My heart pounded in my ears. I could feel the tears falling before I even registered. I was crying. I'm not going to keep enabling you, I said quietly but firmly, before ending the call. I released a shaky breath I hadn't even realized I'd been holding. I knew she was probably struggling. I knew she wasn't herself when she talked like that, but that didn't make it hurt any less. The walls suddenly felt like they were closing in. I needed to get out of this hallway, this building. I just needed some air. I rushed toward the elevator, tapping the button impatiently before giving up and taking the stairs instead. When I made it to the ground floor, I was met with a sense of familiarity. At the front desk sat a woman who had greeted Christian and me earlier. When she saw me, she smiled and waved. Hi. Welcome back, Alexander. Can I help you with something? I looked at her, then glanced toward the glass exit doors. I hadn't meant to go far, just get some air, but maybe this woman could help. Yes, thank you. I paused and glanced at her name tag. Emma, do you happen to know where the closest bar is? Christian's POV. I checked my watch for what felt like the 100th time. Alex still hadn't returned, and we were less than 20 minutes away from our next meeting. His laptop and materials were still sitting on the lounge table. If he had left everything behind, surely he wasn't far? I had texted him 5 minutes ago. Still no response. Time to take matters into my own hands. I packed up both our things and stepped out of the lounge. The corridors were empty. I peeked into nearby offices and meeting rooms. Nothing. No sign of him. I pulled out my phone again. Still no messages. Maybe I should try calling? I dialed his business number first. Rang. And rang. And rang, then straight to voicemail. I sighed, then tried his personal number. 2 rings. Voicemail. Seriously? I called again. This time, it barely rang before cutting off. Now I was genuinely getting worried. I had searched every floor we had access to, checked all the public spaces and even the restrooms. Nothing. There was only one person left I could think of calling. I opened the emergency contact list I had stored in my phone and tapped the number next to the name labeled Janet. The phone barely rang once before someone answered. Hello, a woman said. Hi, I paused. Is this Janet? Christian POV. No, this is Joan. Joan. Yes, hello, this is Christian Ivanov. There was a pause. Joan, are you still there? Yes, my apologies. How can I assist you, Mr. Ivanov? She stammered. I must have caught her off guard. Sorry for the sudden call to your personal line. Alex has you listed as his emergency contact. He had me listed under Janet? She asked. I blinked, pulled the phone away, and checked the contact information. Nope. It said Joan. I was just the one who got it wrong. Difficult to read, I lied. Anyway, I'm having trouble locating him, and we have a meeting in. I checked my watch. 7 minutes. Have you heard from him? He hasn't called, she said. Aren't you two in New York? I can't imagine he would go far. What did he say when he left? I thought back to our brief conversation. He got a call. Said he needed to take it. I told him not to take too long, but he didn't respond. Joan was quiet on the other end. Give me a minute. I'll try to reach him and call you back if I learn anything. Thank you, I replied before the call ended. With nothing else to do, I paced near the front entrance of the building. A receptionist was seated at the desk nearby. I approached her, hoping she might have seen Alex. She wasn't the same woman who'd checked us in earlier. This was someone else. Hi, she said brightly. How can I help you? I'm looking for someone who may have left through those doors about 45 minutes ago. I pointed. He was wearing a blue button-down shirt and a gold tie. Designer tie, actually. I gave it to him. I caught myself rambling and paused when I saw her expression. I had definitely overshared. A man in a blue shirt with a gold tie? She confirmed. I nodded. If it was more than 30 minutes ago, Emma might have been on duty then. She went on break but should be back soon, probably within the next 10 minutes. Got it? Thank you, I said, taking a seat on one of the benches nearby. While I waited, I pulled out my phone and called John's office. Alex POV. I stared at my phone. Several missed calls from Christian. I should probably call him back, right? Bartender. I called, raising a hand. Oh wait, what was I saying? I paused, squinting at my drink. Oh, should I call my boss back or not? What do you think? The bartender gave me a sympathetic look and shook his head. Okay, buddy, I'm cutting you off. I have no idea what you're asking me anymore. No, I groaned. We must keep the whiskey flowing, but I was cut off by my phone buzzing again. This time it was Joan. It took a few tries to get the phone into my hand. Hello. I slurred. Alex? Are you drinking right now? Joan's voice was sharp with concern. No, I mumbled unconvincingly. There was a long sigh on the other end. What happened? Nothing. Alex, she pushed gently. I exhaled sharply. My mom called. Silence. That woman, Joan muttered under her breath. Her voice softened, but I still heard the anger behind it. Anger I didn't have the strength to express myself. Hand the phone to the bartender, please. Yes, ma'am. I waved over the bartender. Sir, my people would like a word with your people. I handed him the phone. Hello, he answered. Yes, yeah, I cut him off about 15 minutes ago. He's been drinking mostly soda. Don't worry, I've got him here. I blinked at my glass. Soda? So that's why it tasted so sweet. I'll make sure he stays until someone gets him. No problem. He hung up and handed the phone back to me. Sir, I demand you bring me a proper drink, I said, trying my best to be serious. He just chuckled, poured me another Coke, and moved on. The betrayal. He was getting a tip, just not a generous one. 3 $1 bills instead of 5. That would show him. My petty thoughts were interrupted by a hand on my back. Alex, what on earth are you doing? Christian's voice came from behind me. I jumped in surprise, almost tipping off the stool. I just came here, for drink, I mumbled as I turned around. His once neatly styled hair was tousled, his tie loosened, shirt slightly rumpled. He looked stressed, but also relieved. You're drunk, he said flatly, though there was concern in his eyes. Come on, Alex. Time to go. But I have a complaint to file, I said, pointing at my glass. He served me soda. Soda, Christian. We should sue. Christian pinched the bridge of his nose, trying not to smile. Hey, Alex. Let's go. Thank you for looking after him, he said to the bartender. You're a traitor, I muttered as Christian helped me off the stool. No worries, the bartender replied with a kind wave. I'll cover the soda. Just get him home safe. Christian gave him a small nod of gratitude, then gently guided me toward the door. Christian, POV. Alex, I'm going to need you to take that off now, I said firmly, watching this tipsy man-child parade around the hotel room with a bed sheet tied around his neck like he was some kind of superhero. You don't get it, Christian. This is the only way to defeat the enemy and protect the castle, Alex mumbled, his voice filled with conviction. He'd officially lost it. What kind of fantasy quest are you on now? I asked, pinching the bridge of my nose. You've played Dungeons and Dragons? He asked, his eyes lighting up, clearly missing the sarcasm. That's not the point. I sighed, standing up. We need to get to bed. Give me the sheet. He eventually complied, letting me pull the makeshift cape from around his neck and place it back on the bed. Now, I continued, turning toward him, next mission, get you out of that suit and into bed, literally, not metaphorically. Alex had tried to remove his tie himself, but it had somehow gotten stuck halfway over his head. He now resembled one of those office workers who'd had a long night and made peace with chaos. But it's comfy, he whined. You're not sleeping in a suit, I told him, reaching up to loosen the knot. Once I got it untangled, the tie slipped off easily. I removed his jacket next and placed both items neatly on a nearby chair. When I turned back, I noticed his face had turned red. Why, you know I can totally do this myself, he stammered, fumbling with his shirt buttons like they were puzzle pieces. Shoo, I said, gently swatting his hands away. I unfastened the buttons one by one. As the shirt opened, it revealed more of his skin. My eyes lingered longer than they should have. I hadn't meant to stare, but I did. He wasn't bulky, but he was lean, his frame toned and defined in a way I hadn't expected. He looked like someone who ran to clear his head or think things through. I nodded toward his pants. All right, those two. His eyes widened. What? Your pants, Alex. You'll be more comfortable. Relax, I'm just trying to help. Looking like he was trying not to combust, he fumbled with his belt. Eventually, he managed to undo the clasp and step out of the dress pants, leaving him in plain boxer briefs. He paused awkwardly, clearly self-conscious. I turned away to grab something from his suitcase and pulled out a soft gray t-shirt. Everything in his suitcase was rolled neatly, his clothes arranged like he'd planned each outfit. The attention to detail made me smile. Put this on. I handed him the shirt. He tried, but as soon as he got it over his head, he started scratching his neck. It feels weird. That's because you've got it on backwards, I chuckled, stepping in to help. I reached up to adjust the shirt, and my fingers brushed against his side. He shivered at the touch. That stopped me cold. His eyes fluttered shut briefly. When I let my hand trail lightly along his ribs, he leaned into the contact. His breathing slowed, eyes locking with mine again. He didn't pull away. "Alex," I said softly. I didn't even know what I was going to say next. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned in on his toes and kissed me, just lightly. I froze. By the time I realized what was happening, he had already started to pull back. But I didn't let him go. I pulled him back toward me and returned the kiss. Gently, slowly, carefully, like I didn't want to break the moment or overwhelm him. His lips were soft, and he melted into it with an innocence that made my chest ache. One hand slid behind my neck, fingers brushing into my hair. I felt his breath hitch slightly as we kissed, and it stirred something deeper in me. But before things could go too far, I made myself stop. I pulled away, and Alex blinked up at me, looking dazed and confused. "I'm sorry," he whispered quickly. "You're still a bit out of it," I said gently. "Let's get you to bed." He nodded and wobbled toward the mattress. Instead of laying down normally, he flopped face first into the bed like a starfish. I couldn't help but laugh. This was exactly what he did the first night I stayed over at his place. Smiling, I pulled off my own work clothes and climbed in beside him. "Did I mess up?" he mumbled, his voice muffled by the pillow. "You messed up a lot today," I said, pulling the blanket over us, "but that kiss wasn't one of them. Not even close." Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.